Hello neighbors, it's Brad here at Etrailer, and today we're taking a look at installing a Class 1 CURT trailer hitch on a 2019 Nissan Maxima. So here we actually have our trailer hitch installed, and you can see it's tucked under there pretty well. So it gives it a nice kind of OEM appearance there. And you're gonna see this is 1.25 inches. So while it is a little bit smaller, that's still gonna allow you to hook up some of your bike racks or cargo carriers. And it's gonna be nice to be able to have that addition on here to be able to put your accessories. Now you're gonna see this does have a reinforced collar around the 1.25 inches, so it's gonna be nice and strong here. It's also coated in black powder coat. So over time, it's gonna look great, even with some road grime hitting it. It's going to be nice and black throughout its lifespan. Now you're also going to see there's going to be these plate style safety chain loops. So if you do plan on ever pulling a trailer, a small utility trailer maybe, hooking up your chains is going to be nice and easy. So it's going to be great for your standard size, and even your larger clevis style should have no problem hooking onto there as well. Now, it does not include a hitch pin and clip here, but this is going to be required to actually keep your accessories in here. Now, a lot of your accessories when you purchase them, whether it be your cargo carrier or bike rack, will actually come with one. But if you're looking for a different option or you need to pick up an additional, you can actually get locking ones available, so that's kind of nice. You can put your accessories in, lock it in place, and know that it's not going to disappear. We have plenty of options here at Etrailer if you want to pick one of those up. Now, another thing that we'll want to check is our actual clearances, and this is going to be important because when you put your accessories on, you want to know how it lives on the actual vehicle. So measuring from our receiver tube opening to the furthest point on our rear fascia, we're looking at about 3.5 inches here. So consider that when you're putting your accessories in, you're going to want to make sure that doesn't make contact with the rear fascia of the vehicle. Another thing you're going to want to take into account is going to be the ground clearance. So as you can see from the bottom of our receiver tube to the ground is going to be 8 inches. So relatively low. You're not going to really probably have any issues as far as just the hitch making contact with the ground, but when you put your accessories on, some of them actually drop down, and when you're driving on an incline, as the car kind of tilts back, those can hang pretty low. So keep that in mind when you're driving on an incline or maybe some rougher terrain. That way you don't damage your accessories. Now, as far as weight capacity goes, I talked earlier, if you plan on towing a small trailer, you do have a gross trailer weight rating here of 2,000 pounds. So relatively small because it is Class 1, but that means the weight of the trailer plus the accessories loaded up needs to be under that 2,000 pounds. Now you have a tongue weight rating of 200 pounds. And what that means is the pressure that's actually put on this receiver tube opening. So your bike racks or cargo carriers, the max that you're going to want to be able to load that up is going to be 200 pounds. Now you want to check your owner's manual of the vehicle to make sure that you're not exceeding those numbers just with the hitch. So take the lowest of those numbers, make sure that you're staying under that just to make sure that you're safe while towing or hauling your accessories. Now, as far as the installation goes, it's relatively simple. You are going to have to take your mufflers off, which seems a little bit scary, but the bolts are actually pretty accessible. You might have to raise the vehicle up just a little bit on some jack stands. You might actually be able to do that just laying on the ground if that's what you want to do. You are going to have to make some little bit of elongation of holes, so you're going to be grinding or drilling out, or the method that I used, it was actually a hole saw. So you will be drilling a little bit, so make sure you have your safety glasses ready as you're going to have some metal shavings, but really it's just 4 bolts that bolt directly into the frame, so it's pretty easy, and I'm going to walk you through all those steps to make sure you get your hitch installed. So let's take a look at that. To begin our installation, we're actually going to be removing the mufflers from this vehicle, which can seem a little bit scary, but really it's nice and easy to gain access to these. But a lot of times exhaust over time will get corroded, especially if you live in an area that has winter and salt. So we're gonna go ahead and get some penetrating spray on those bolts to help kind of loosen that up, just to kind of give us a good fighting chance. So the ones that we're gonna be spraying, we have one here, and then also these 2. Now the reason being we're taking these off is this is actually a solid exhaust mount. There is a little bit of rubber here, but we're not really going to be able to get that out of place. So getting these off is going to be a little bit easier, allowing us to actually mount our hitch up top. So if you're doing this at home, in your garage, or on the ground in your driveway, you're going to want to jack up your car a little bit in the rear. You shouldn't have to get too terribly high, but enough to gain access to all this. So just make sure you chalk the front of the vehicle. Once you raise your vehicle up, spray that with some penetrating oil. If you don't have any, that's okay, as long as you have the right bit on here so it doesn't round off. But the penetrating oil, again, will kind of knock some of that rust and corrosion down for us. So now we're going to go back with a 16mm socket. I'm using a swivel on an impact to knock these loose, but really if you have a ratchet and a socket, you should be able to get these knocked loose as well. So let's go ahead and get these all loosened up. This one here. So once you have those nuts taken off, we're actually going to slide this back, and that should take it out of the isolator that's above the muffler. So go ahead and just kind of work this back into this little exhaust shield here. And then kind of rotating it, I can see the actual hanger bracket up top. So I might have to kind of get a little different angle on it here to get this out. There we are. So just pushing it a little bit towards the bumper will allow this to slide out, and you can see where this actually sits into that. So kind of just pulling it straight out should do the trick. So go ahead, set your muffler aside. Go ahead and do the same on the other side of the vehicle. Now some Maximas actually have a heat shield above the muffler, and there's 2 rivets that actually hold that in place. Now we're going to be removing those, so you're going to want to drill those rivets out just by taking a drill bit, drilling directly in the center, and then stepping it up to a larger one, and eventually that rivet should pop out. You can take that heat shield out, as it's not going to actually go back on because the hitch impedes that. Now ours does not have that, and yours may not as well, so that's good. And also in the instruction manual, they recommended removing this panel, but I've gone ahead and test fit our hitch up, and I don't really see a clearance issue, so I'm going to kind of proceed and see if we can just leave that in place. Now the way that this actually mounts up, in your hardware you're going to see there's a spacer block and a carriage bolt, as well as a fish wire and a nut. And the way that that works is we're actually going to be feeding these up into the chassis, and you're going to have this spacer block which will hold it in place, and that thread will actually be hanging down, and we'll be able to mount that hitch up. But you're going to see an issue pretty quickly, as this carriage bolt as well as the spacer block is not able to feed in there. So they say to enlarge these holes, and that's totally fine. If you have a die grinder bit or just a rotary tool, you can sand that out in order to get these to fit. But I also kind of like to keep these holes roughly about that size, as it's going to help us line this up a little bit better with the hitch. So my workaround, and you don't have to do it this way, but I'm going to be using a little bit of a hole saw, and I'm going to drill a hole up here. That way it's easily able to be fed in, and it's going to make it a little bit easier to align the hitch with those holes staying the same size. So I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to drill my hole here, and I'll show you the fish wire technique to get this in place. So using my hole saw, I have 1 1/8 and 1/8, which is going to be just big enough for us to get that carriage bolt as well as the spacer block in. And this little portion of the frame really has nothing going on there, so I'm going to just go ahead, make my hole here, and drill this out. If you are enlarging the holes or drilling, which you'll need to be doing, make sure you have your safety glasses on, as there's going to be some metal shavings potentially, so you want to keep yourself protected. Now you're going to see in your kit, this is our fish wire. And the way this is going to work is we're going to need to actually mount up these for our hitch. So our 2 holes that we have are going to be these here. And so the best way to do it, let's start at this one first. I'm going to take my coiled end, and you can put a bend on this if you want to make it a little bit easier, but with that large hole that we made with the hole saw, you're going to be able to see that coiled end poke through here. Now what we'll do is we'll take our spacer block, and you can just feed that in there, and then on this coiled end we're actually going to take our carriage bolt and just thread this on here. And then you can also feed that through and kind of just make your way down. You may have to jostle it a little bit for it to actually line up like that, but now you can see we have our stud hanging out. So we can actually go ahead and remove this very carefully, as we're going to be redoing this on this hole as well and the other side of the vehicle. So same process here. We're just going to go ahead, loop this over, and we'll grab our spacer block and our carriage bolt and do the same here. So now we have both of our studs fed through, so our driver's side is done. We're going to go ahead on the passenger and drill out the other side and do the exact same process. So whether you enlarged your holes or you actually used a hole saw, you're going to want to actually go back where that exposed metal is that we've cut into. It's going to get rust and corrosion over time if you don't protect it. So I'm just putting a little bit of black spray paint. You can get some undercoating as well, whatever works best for you, but this is just going to make sure that this doesn't turn into rust quickly. So now you're going to want to grab your hitch with an extra set of hands is going to make this a lot easier. Now if you're working in your driveway and you're by yourself, you can actually put this on a jack with a block of wood and kind of slowly raise it in place. But while doing this, take your time, because you don't want to push those bolts back up in the frame. Otherwise you're going to have to fish them out with a magnet. So take your time feeding it. You're going to want those threads to poke through the holes on the hitch. And you also want to have your nuts handy, because we're going to want to actually hand thread these on just a hair. Now this is a tight fit. It seems like on the spare tire well, it is kind of rubbing against it, so it might fight you just a bit. Now I was able to actually retain this plastic undercarriage here. It is pressing against it, so that could make it a little bit more difficult. So in hindsight, yes, you can actually remove this to make it a little bit easier. We also found that our hitch itself was a little skewed off, so using a pry bar here, I was able to pry this out to get these to line up over the holes. So if you need to do that, if you're having trouble with these actual studs going through the holes, put a long-handled flathead screwdriver and pry that, and you should be able to get that to raise up over it. So once you're in that position where you have them all hand tightened on, you're going to want to go back with your torque wrench. Now if you don't have a torque wrench, you can generally rent them at an auto parts store, or we actually have these here at Etrailer, and we're going to just put this to the manufacturer's recommendations in the instruction manual. And we're going to be taking our 19 millimeter and we're going to be tightening these down. So make sure you get all four torqued down to the proper spec. So now with all of our hardware tightened down and torqued to spec, we're ready to put our mufflers back on and get ready to use our hitch. And that was a look and installation of the CURT Class 1 trailer hitch on a 2019 Nissan Maxima.